Welcome back to our MJSA Expo education series. I'm delighted to be joined by Teresa Fryé. She's the founder and president of TechForm, which is really the premier platinum casting company in the country. And she knows more about platinum casting than anyone I've met. I can comfortably say that. And I've met quite a few because we've been in this industry a while. She has produced tremendous amounts of research on platinum, presented papers at the Santa Fe Symposium. She has hosted for many years now the Portland Jewelry Symposium, bringing back good technical knowledge to the jewelry industry in that way. And I just really appreciate you taking the time to do this today. So welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to be able to share a topic I'm very passionate about, platinum, as many of you know. It's the last 28 years I have pursued knowledge in the platinum space, and our latest research, one of many, has been on the wear resistance of platinum. And this all came about when we had a conversation down at Santa Fe Symposium about the mechanical properties of platinum and why is platinum so incredibly different than gold when it comes to wear resistance. So we had a big huddle of metallurgists, and it was a stimulating conversation, to say the least. And springing forth from that conversation were steps that we needed to take to actually understand why is it that platinum outlasts gold jewelry. We know this anecdotally from bench jewelers.
Right, everybody says it for years. Platinum,
yeah.
Set your diamonds in platinum. Platinum lasts longer. But you wanted to know why.
Yeah, it's not like, okay, we believe this to be true, but on an atomic level, what is going on? So we want to take this apart atom by atom. And so you have to start really with building up the information on mechanical properties. And so you have to test the metal, you need to understand strength, you need to understand ductility, you need to understand hardness. And so you create this baseline of information that is going to give you the data to be able to use as a springboard for deeper understanding. So we spent about 2 years building up this data.
The baseline? That's what I was going to ask is how did you get to the baseline of the data?
It's a continuing project. We keep adding alloys to this database, but it is quite a lot of work to do all this testing. But right now we have built up the largest database of mechanical properties for platinum in the world.
And you say we, all at TechForm?
Yes.
Or is okay.
Yeah, so the research has taken several twists and turns. So it started out with a conversation, and then TechForm joined up with Wear Test Associates in Texas.
Okay.
We worked with them for 2 years. We have worked extensively with FEM, which is a research institute for precious metals in Germany. They have been absolutely fundamental to this latest research and co-authors on the research, and could not have been done without them. So it's always, science is always a collaboration, and but each partner played a certain role to get us to the next step. And so here was the database of mechanical properties built by TechForm, by FEM, and in part by the Wear Test Associates. And so we had that basic data. And then we said, okay, now that we have this data, we can actually start to look at comparing what happens with platinum and gold jewelry on a micro level. So we started by looking at the individual scratch.
Okay.
So if you think about a scratch on a microscopic level, you see a completely different world, right? You get a scanning electron microscope and you look at that scratch.
We talk about getting a lot of background noise.
And you look at the differences that you see in that scratch. And so that was one of the very first tests that we did. And when you look at that scratch, there's for the gold alloys, we looked at 14 karat white, 18 karat white with nickel alloy. We looked at 14 and 18 karat white with palladium. And then we looked at 2 platinum alloys. One was the US standard platinum ruthenium, and the other one was very, very soft, 95% platinum, 5% iridium. So we wanted real differences in those hardness levels. And so we looked at these scratches, and what we found was that the gold, when you scratch it, it has these little finger-like projections that stick up, right? So we characterize that as micro-cutting.
Do they look like tears, you mean?
It's like, there's little shards that are sticking up that look precariously connected.
Okay.
So, and when you blow this up on an SEM, it's pretty easy to see, that these shards are just barely hanging on. And so that was what we called microcutting. And then when we did the same test with softer platinum alloys, we got what we called microplowing, because you had this nice ductile, rounded edges.
So it pushed it into a groove more.
Yeah, and you could see that when in human wear, you're actually going to be folding over that metal into itself. It didn't have those little vulnerable shards hanging off.
Is that why you get the metal loss in gold? Because you get a shard and then the shard goes away?
Yes, we took it a step further. So after we made these scratches, we did what is called the tape lift. So you put tape down on the scratches, you lift that tape off, you put it on a scanning electron microscope, and then you can characterize what the elements are
on the tape.
On the tape. So
okay.
That's what SEM and EDX, it's reading actually what your elements are going to tell you, oh, that's gold. That's platinum. So we had the little shards that were lifted off, and we could say, sure enough, we're having a concentration of shards coming off of the gold, and we're having almost no perceptible shards coming off of the platinum. So that was really the first step, to just look at the individual scratch. And then the next step was a lot more involved. We looked at a lot of coupons. So we made 5 coupons of each different metal, and we put them into an abrasive tumbler.
So when you say a coupon, you were making something that was flat?
It's actually a cube.
A cube,
yeah,
okay.
Cube. And we made coupons, but the cubes were really more for the abrasive testing that we did. So we put these in an abrasive tumbler. Everything has to be standardized when you do this, because if you're going to create research, the research has to be able to be replicated in another lab. So everything has to be standardized, and this was done according to some European standards that FEM is familiar with. And so we did many, many hours of this tumbling, and then careful measuring and weighing with high sensitivity scales. And so, to make a very long story short, because tumbling is a very long story.
Tumbling is a very long and noisy story.
Yes. Over the span of 200 hours, we were able to surmise that platinum was actually losing less metal than
the gold was?
All the gold alloys.
What were you using for your tumbling medium? Did you use different tumbling mediums, or one?
Yeah, so granite and stone in the beginning, and then we had the next step was more of a polishing, and that was using nutshells.
Okay.
And there's grinding paste, which again, the grinding paste is calibrated. So it's really a lot of detail that you probably don't want me to go into.
Well, I might, but
it's all in the publication. And I mean, this is a very visual topic.
It is.
And so, to be able to describe all this without the aids of the visuals makes it just a little bit more challenging. But it is a lengthy, precise set of tests that you have to go through to be able to say that this was a controlled set of research. And, right down to the fixturing of all these little cubes on nylon, so that they were all just equally spaced, and it's rather painstaking to do. But I mean, the idea, what you're trying to do when you're doing wear testing is you're trying to replicate something that happens in real life
over longer periods of time.
It's very, very difficult to do. I mean, any type of research that you are looking at to replicate human activity, it's almost impossible, right? So you do the best you can to replicate that. And without the anecdotal evidence telling us that the case is for platinum having great wear resistance, you would never be able to do this, right? You would just say, okay, that was a great laboratory test, right?
Right.
So it takes that big anecdotal piece to say, okay, we know this to be true because we've talked to numerous benchmarkers, we've talked to numerous retailers. We know this to be true, and now we want to know why it's true. So then you try to find this best fit scenario. And it took 5 years to find that best fit scenario. We tried so many different things, and we just had to try and try again. And FEM was able to come up with that, just right scenario with the different media that they selected, the different setup that they selected. And we called it the Holy Grail. We've got to get to the Holy Grail because we know this to be true.
But you were driving this whole time. You were the one who kept saying, let's go back, let's try it again, let's try it again.
Yeah, it started out, as a conversation with a group of metallurgists. And then I'm a collaborator. So I'm like, okay, guys,
right?
Let's get to work and prove this. So and so it takes a village. It really does. And there's many more people that were involved in this, many more conversations that were had to try and really, really deeply understand it. But at the end of the day, the rubber hits the road in the lab, and so that's what made this all more compelling. And why is this important, right?
Well, and let's go back to your cubes. So they lost platinum lost less metal in the cubes as well, right? Yes. Gold lost more. Was there another? So we've done a scratch test and we've done your couponer cube tests. So you were consistently proving that gold, in fact, does have more metal loss in these replicated environments than platinum.
Yes, and in the first phase of the research, we found that platinum loses 2 times less.
2 times? That's a lot.
Yes, it's a lot. Than the palladium, the 750 or 18 karat white gold, palladium white gold. And that when we moved into the, three times less. With the palladium white golds, and then 2 times less with the
nickel gold.
Yeah.
Now, is this true of both the platinum ruthenium, which is your harder alloy, and the platinum iridium, which is your softer?
Yes, there was some differentiation in there, but not much, right?
Okay.
So it's really the differentiator was between platinum and gold.
Okay.
And the really interesting part about that is that, generally what you find is that there is a correlation with hardness and wear resistance. So if you go into steels and what have you, there's nothing's ever absolute, right? So you can say, generally speaking, the harder the metal, the more wear resistant it's going to be.
Okay.
So this was not the case.
Interesting.
It's another really interesting fact about platinum that is kind of bucking, the metallurgical trends. So that was a really interesting point that it's behaving different than other metals. And then, of course, when you're a researcher, you're going, well, why
right.
is that, right? And so we have some theories about that. We believe it has something to do with the ductility of the metal, and most jewelers that work with platinum will tell you, it's kind of grabby, And so I like to say it just wants to hang on to itself.
Would that explain why it goes into grooves instead of flaking like the gold? Because it's like
ductile,
it gives, but it doesn't break up.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about, a pizza dough versus potato chips,
Yeah.
I mean, it just doesn't have that crumbliness to it. Uh, and so it's an interesting aspect because that's not true for most other metals.
Most other metals,
and so it's just a unique attribute of platinum. And so basically your platinum piece is just going to move around, and it's just going to take its atoms and do a little dance.
Make room for the impact, right? It's the perfect marriage metal. Like,
Yes.
how to survive a marriage.
Yeah.
Move around,
Right.
do a little dance, make room.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And gold, I mean, as retailers know, as bench jewelers know, if you wear gold every day, it's not going to last.
Yep.
You're going to have to replace that piece. I just ran into a woman in the booth here at the show, and we were talking about platinum, and she held up her grandmother's platinum ring, and she said, "This is my grandmother's ring." And she's a jeweler. She said, "I never had to do anything to it. It had nothing, and was covered with stones. Stones don't fall out."
Nope.
And she said, "I wear it all the time. It's platinum." That is the huge differentiator. So, but and that's all well and good for the consumer messaging, but in our world we want to understand why, because you can tell people something, but until you prove it,
Right. It's still just an anecdote.
it's just an anecdote. And so it's been pretty satisfying to get to this point, right? To say, well, we've proven that actually mass loss is lower for platinum. Now we want to prove, well, why is mass?
That's what I was going to ask.
Right.
So you validated the anecdote in this research.
Yes, and we've gotten down to the point where we have theories.
Okay.
And so, and it's pretty compelling when you look at the research and you look at the scratches and you look at the tape lifts and you look at the measurement of mass loss. So you start building this whole case, and now we want to look more deeply at things like the microstructure, which means what's below the surface, porosity. What happens when you scratch porosity? Is it more likely to lose metal than a non-porous surface? And so there's more nuance as you start going deeper and deeper into the research, and so there's a lot more to still be done. But it was just huge to say we've actually developed a test that is replicating the human experience, and so that was the big leap that took the 5 years of hard work to be able to reach.
And one of your theories so far, because in scientific research you have to develop theories so you can then go test those theories, is that it moves around more, that it holds on to itself.
Yes.
Did you come up with any other theories so far that you want to test?
There is another one that I'd really like to learn more about. Now, gold alloys have a lot of base metal. Mm-hmm. Platinum alloys do not. I mean, there's platinum cobalt that is widely used, but most platinum alloys are pure platinum group metals. So what that means is that they don't oxidize, they don't tarnish. So they're chemically inert. And so one of the other parts of the research that we did do, we only did a very short test on this, was we did exposure to artificial human sweat.
Okay.
And so we put the little cubes into our chamber, our sweat chamber, and for 24 hours. So it was really too short. But in 24 hours, we still noticed that especially the 14 karat white golds.
With or without nickel?
This one was, I think this was the nickel that was worse.
Okay.
Yes, because the palladium white is going to, that's another, metal that is going to help to mitigate. But so the nickel white gold really tarnished, noticeably in comparison to the platinum. The platinum changed color a little bit, but we think that was just because of the tumbling process, just dulling the surface. But platinum, as we know, is chemically inert.
Right.
And so there's absolutely no chance for it to tarnish. So then you start asking yourself the question, okay, if you've got a base metal containing alloy and you are building up this tarnish layer and you're constantly in human wear, it's a sort of an iterative process, right? So you have this very thin oxide layer that you really probably can't see, and then you're brushing it off.
And it's more fragile because it has that oxide layer. Yeah.
And so it builds up, brushes off, builds up, brushes off, builds up, brushes off. And so between scratching and the potential for this this tarnishing, oxidation, whatever you want to call it, that's pretty compelling too. And this is well studied in base metals.
Yeah,
it's very well known. And so how much is the gold protecting the base metal? Because the noble metals, they do, gold does a good job of, trying to fight that,
Good.
right?
Yes, it does.
And it does a better job at the 18 karat level
than it does at the 14
karat level, So, but what we think is it cannot overcome
the fact that it has base metal in it.
Yes. When you see that tarnish, you know that something's going on.
Okay.
And you just know that platinum doesn't have that problem.
So now you're going to go into a new phase of testing. Are you going to be testing, and how? I have so many questions. So as you go into this new phase of testing, will you test both of those theories and validate them? Or are you going to focus on one or the other of those theories first?
Yeah, that's a really good question because we haven't really designed the next
phase.
We're back at the huddle stage right now. So we recognize that these are factors that could be at play. We don't know how much one would lend to the other. So, but I think really you're looking at an interplay. The study of wear resistance is called tribology. And it's not so much just about the material that you're studying, but it's about the interaction of the mating surfaces. And the material plays a role in that.
Sure.
But it's complex because in human wear you've got abrasives and toothpaste.
Exactly.
I mean,
the hand lotions,
solutions, all these things, right? And then you've got the metals, and then you've got the human hands, which people that clap a lot, or it just depends on what you're doing with your hands. So that's why it's so hard to replicate.
Yep.
Because you've got this broad range of behaviors out there in the marketplace. And so it's really looking at the complexity and not forgetting that, you can just do this tumbling test. Well, that's only one element.
Right.
So what happens when you start adding more complex layers to that? And it's challenging in the laboratory to add the complex layers.
Right, like how do you do the friction plus the lotion and which lotion? And
Yeah, and one of the things that, in the very early phases with Wear Test Associates, we were like, how do we get the human sweat together with the abrasive? And so we put the platinum, the human sweat, and sand.
Every jeweler listening to this is going, that's the ew factor. That's the could you clean my ring moment that everybody just dreads.
We put that in the tumbler and we let it run for 24 hours. We opened it up and it was like, oh my God, it was just this gray goo, It was
lovely.
And we're like, this is not working very well. It was just, you need to have more of a uniform exposure, right? So that's where when FEM shifted to, okay, let's space these cubes equally and try to have this uniform, type of bombardment. And in a tumbler, it's not going to be 100% uniform, but you try your best to make sure that, it's as close as possible. So tribology is one of the more complex
Types of product testing
to test. Yes, and when I first started going down this road, I talked to a lot of people, and I heard it over and over again. And this is PhD level, because you just have to collaborate and get a lot of different opinions about this before you start gelling on the direction you want to go in. And I was forewarned, this is really, really difficult. And then I talked to my sister, who does oncology research, and she said, just think about if you had to use human subjects.
Yes.
She said, you actually have amnesia, because we can't do that accelerated testing, we can't do 10 years and 24 hours. So then I was like, oh yeah, okay, maybe it isn't as bad as all that, So you start to respect the amount of work, the amount of time, the amount of money that it takes to really get to those results. And you have to just keep going. You can't just give up.
Or assume that you know enough now and you can make a claim.
Yes. And you don't go out, before you really have some solid science and the data to back it up. And, when we sent this in for publication with the Johnson Matthey Technology Review, it's a peer-reviewed journal. And so, you have the chance to be, torn down.
Which you can get beat up.
Exactly what you want. We had some great feedback. And, so it ended up... we went back and we recharged after that a little bit, so we're really comfortable with where we are in terms of just reaching the most important point, that this standardized test, that any lab in the world that can really get some basic equipment, the media, everything, the information is available. And so across the world, precious metals, it doesn't just have to be the jewelry industry, but precious metals manufacturers have a tool now that they can use to understand the wear resistance of their metals. And, the next thing really to look at too is, what happens within, for my company, within the platinum group metals and the platinum group metals alloys, what kind of differentiation can we see in wear within this group?
From alloy to alloy.
Yes, because, alloys are incredibly important. So very often people say, well,
I use platinum are you for everything, right?
What kind of ring do you have? Well, it's platinum. Well, what kind of platinum is it? I don't know. It's platinum. And it's, okay, no, it's not platinum. Or the ring, the stones would have fallen out. It's a platinum alloy. Probably 95% pure, but that 5% it packs a lot of punch. Or does it? Or it doesn't, and so in the right alloys, you can get into, my goodness, any range of acceptable hardness, right? Up from 200 Vickers down to about 130 is the lowest we would recommend.
Compare that to other metals so that our audience can kind of understand that.
So a lot of the gold alloys, because they're loaded with base metal, they're harder than platinum. Palladium, white golds tend to be a little softer, more on par with platinum, but most of them are going to be harder. For example, you've got anywhere from 260, 280 down to like maybe 160. I think is probably the range that we've got in our publication for these white gold alloys. So they're just, in general, you're going to find that they're going to be harder. But as I was mentioning earlier, that doesn't mean that they are more wear resistant.
Because platinum has this inverse relationship with hardness and wear resistance.
Yes. And it's important to note that distortion and strength, also are something to look at independent from just hardness.
So when you say distortion, are we talking like a tree that bends doesn't break?
So distortion, for example, you can look at platinum and say, well, it's extremely wear resistant. But that doesn't mean that if you have a cross section in your ring that's just too thin, that it's not going to distort. Because that's now we're talking about
Mass?
strength.
Yeah. Okay.
Strength and hardness generally are going to correlate. So the harder it is, the stronger it is. I'm sure there's some exception out there, because there usually is. But you can say pretty safely that that's the case. So what you want to look at in your alloy is, what is my strength and my hardness for design purposes, and then what is my wear resistance for longevity purposes. And you have to just kind of understand that it's not a one size fits all. And I think we all thought it was, until we did this research or we listened to the anecdotal evidence. Because if you're talking in base metals, then you're going to be having a totally different conversation. So this is truly unique about platinum. And there is so much that is unique about platinum, where you have to wait a minute. That's bucking the trend. Right? And so,
it makes me wonder, we know with platinum, when it's moved, it wants to move back. It wants to hold on to its shape. Does this relate to all of that? Or is that just another theory you guys have to test?
Yeah, well, what you hear is that platinum stays where it's put. So for setting purposes, you set the stone, got the prong. Usually it's a nice little bead sitting on top of the stone. And it's going to stay hugging that stone, right? The platinum will stay to hug that stone. The white gold in particular, you hear about this spring back, right? So it pops back. Platinum just stays put.
Okay.
But the other thing it does, if you look at it over time, it starts spreading out because it moves. But as it spreads out, it just starts really hugging that stone. The stone gets safer over time. It's safe to begin with because it's going to stay in place. But then it just keeps just hugging tighter.
And that's part of what you want to test next and understand why? Or are you really trying to figure out why it doesn't
more about this? Why does it hang on to its atoms? I know it's staying put, but more on a micro level. Why is that it just, the scratch test is really compelling, but we need to take that further and really understand that individual scratch.
Okay.
And I think what we'll find is that it's just folding over onto itself because of its ductility. We think the ductility plays a really strong role. But we go into the harder platinum alloys that are not as ductile, and we've measured all this with the database I mentioned in the beginning, and they also behave the same way. They hang on to their atoms. So you've got gold being harder and not hanging on to its atoms, and you've got platinum being harder and still hanging on to its atoms.
So if you take a platinum RU, for instance, and you've got a harder platinum alloy there, it's still not going to be as hard as a gold alloy, right?
No, we've got platinum alloys that are harder. There's so many gold alloys out there.
That's true.
It's hard to put them into, a single bucket. But in general, you're going to find the gold alloys are going to be harder and stronger, but less wear resistant.
So even as you increase the hardness of a platinum alloy, you are still hanging on to the metal better.
It still exceeds the performance of the gold. It loses less mass, even at those higher hardness levels.
Okay.
Which was another aha moment for us, because, there was a moment we're going, wow, is this really going to be, pointing towards strength and hardness? And then it's like, no, it's just platinum alloys that have this, it's in their inherent nature to not let go,
So, like, how fast can you get the next research done? Because I want to know why now too.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question. We are going to be powwowing in May again, and we'll see what next steps are.
next?
You know, you've always got to rally up your funding. You have to
Yep.
find the time in a busy world, and and it just takes time and the willingness to stick with it. That we need to know. And another important point is that, I mean, there's not a lot of research out there about platinum.
Now, to my knowledge, I don't think anyone's done this kind of wear testing with other precious metals either. Like, we do it all the time in plating. Plating gets a ton of wear resistance testing for the fashion industry. But I don't know that it's been done in gold or silver, has it?
Yeah, we found a few articles, and they're referenced in the beginning of our paper for wear resistance, but I mean, it's just a tiny handful. And I think part of those were even just, what you're saying, plating.
Mostly plating.
So it's been under researched, and platinum has been very much under researched. And so it's one of the fun things about doing platinum research is like, okay, landmark research.
That's right. Because all this blue sky research. Now, will understanding this, like, I know for years Platinum Hill worked with, educating jewelers on how to work with platinum. And it was the tactical, practical application. Do this, not that. Use this alloy, it will be better than that alloy. Will understanding this take us to another level of understanding about why we need to work with platinum a little differently to get the results?
I think that it's going to lend to it. When you're looking at, performance in human wear, that's different than looking at alloy behaviors in like the molten state. But things do layer upon each other, and sometimes you'll have an aha moment that you didn't know that you would find. And so you're just building stories about material behaviors, and so I think that we do have an opportunity to have some layering like that. But there's still so much more to learn about alloys too, and one of the things that we are constantly trying to educate people on is the differences in casting that you will experience between the different alloys. So I would say, platinum cobalt, it flows like water, and its high fluidity basically says it's going to go into your fine filigree sections just beautifully. It's far easier to cast in platinum cobalt than it is in platinum ruthenium. And so if you're having trouble casting a design, try it. Bench jewelers will say, oh, it's magnetic. It's going to oxidize on the bench. I hate platinum cobalt. And I would say, well, if you really love that design and you really want it in platinum, then you need to just get over that for a minute.
Now, is there a downside to it? Because the fluidity is great for difficult, designs where you've got lots of little, gating issues and tiny crevices to get through. Is there a downside to the platinum cobalt, or you'd say, nope, this is a platinum?
Yeah, not in the casting process. No. There's absolutely no downside in the casting process. It's easier.
Okay.
It's a lower temperature. It's really just on the bench, and I think it's really bench jewelers. They don't expect platinum to oxidize. They expect it to be this clean, pristine, white, and I understand that. When it gets that little oxide layer that you just simply wipe right off. It's really, it's a way to get a specific design. It's a way to cast more successfully, because that fluidity also translates into lower porosity levels in your casting. So it's a hard sell in this country, but you shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's a good alloy for a lot of things.
So yeah, get your fill.
Yeah.
and then wipe it off.
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah.
it's a lot harder to deal with porosity.
Yeah, and it's strong alloy. It's a good alloy, and platinum ruthenium. I mean, it's whiter. It's that clean, pristine.
What you expect.
Yeah, what we've grown to expect platinum to look like, especially on bench, because you can't really tell much difference between platinum, ruthenium, and cobalt. In the case, you can. There's a slightly bluer, darker hue to it, but it's
To the platinum.
you need a trained eye. Yeah, you need a trained eye.
In the casting, do you always go for platinum cobalt, or are there times when you want to go with a platinum ruthenium or another alloy? When?
Well, as a caster, we go with what the customer wants, and I can tell you.
Well, if they'll take your advice every time, what would you do?
Well, we try to talk them into cobalt only if platinum ruthenium will not work. Even if we say, look, that design, no. But most jewelers want platinum ruthenium. Most designs can be cast successfully in platinum ruthenium.
Are there times, like in your opinion, because I hear, you're working with customers, you're doing what they want. I'm hearing what you're saying about the platinum cobalt. If it weren't a discussion, if you could just be like, this is the right thing for this case, are there times when you would think platinum ruthenium casting was superior to cobalt, and when would that be?
Only to color match next to another platinum ruthenium or platinum iridium casting.
So the cobalt's always superior in casting,
Always.
except for okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah, it is. But for people that are struggling, with casting, they should try it. They should try it. It's a good solution. So, but the whiteness of platinum ruthenium and the fact that there's so much out there, and people want that color match.
But can you really see? I have a hard time seeing the difference between a platinum cobalt and a platinum ruthenium, and I have a really good color eye. It's almost like you need it. Can you really see it beyond the colorimeter?
It's nuanced.
It's really mild.
Yeah, it depends on the jeweler, the customer. But to say it doesn't exist is wrong. It exists. It's just nuance. Yeah.
So what else? But you think a lot about alloys and which alloys to use for which purposes. So now we've got this world where we've got everybody casting in platinum cobalt. Now what's the next thing you want them to know about
platinum
alloys?
cobalt's still the minor alloy cast in this country.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Europe there's a lot more of it.
There is.
Especially I think the UK. But there are other alloys, and there's a harder alloy that we're actually selling more and more of, and it's a platinum ruthenium gallium alloy.
Gallium.
Yes.
What are the percentages?
It's around 2% gallium, something like that.
Well, that's interesting. Okay, gallium properties. Why the gallium?
It's a great partner.
Okay.
Yeah. So you go from platinum ruthenium at around 130 Vickers up to platinum ruthenium gallium at 180 to 200. So it's a huge difference. You can still set. It's polishes a little bit easier is the feedback that we get, because it's just a little bit crisper.
Okay.
It's better when it comes to distortion, because it's got that higher strength. We know that its wear resistance is going to be great. So it's really actually a very good alloy, and I'd like to see more jewelers adopting this alloy, just because you can go with a thinner cross section and not have the distortion that you can. Some jewelers are making very lightweight pieces that most alloys are going to have a hard time standing up to. So you have to always think about the strength of your material and the cross section of that design and how it's going to hold it up.
And you're doing that in casting also, or is this also a good fabrication alloy?
Don't know how many people are fabricating. Not many people fabricate anymore. So.
Studio jewelers. We have studio jewelers.
Yes. I mean, it's.
So you're talking casting.
Yeah. I mean, most of the industry's jewelry is cast, because it's more economical. So. But I'm sure that you can. It's going to be stiffer. It's going to be harder to, bend and form. And and it's going to cold work while you're doing that.
Right.
So it could get a little bit too hard if you take that higher as cast hardness and strength and you cold work it.
I know you have a hard stop, but I have one more question. Let's review for everybody which platinum alloys we should be staying away from.
Yeah.
Because we still struggle with that.
Yeah,
so what are we not supposed to be using?
Right. So the platinum iridium alloys are really too soft. Even the 10% platinum iridium, which used to be very common.
Yeah.
You've got about a 110 Vickers at that 10% level. And if you're just going to cast the piece, you're not going to be cold working the piece. You're going to risk that the consumer is going to be disappointed. 5% iridium, you absolutely should not. You should not use that for jewelry. Maybe an earring, but rings, stay away.
Why do people keep using it? Because we've been saying this for years.
I think because it sets like butter. Okay, yeah, I can do that pave in record time, right? So this is a bench-centric approach. This is not a consumer-centric approach. We need to be consumer-centric. This piece needs to last for generations, right? Platinum will last for generations.
Like grandma's ring.
If you make it in the right alloy. I guarantee you that ring I just saw was not 5% iridium that was cast. She wouldn't have it. Those stones would all be gone.
Yeah.
It would be, yeah. So it's a concern. We refuse to cast it.
Yeah.
And yes, does it cast beautifully? Absolutely, it'll cast beautifully. It'll set beautifully. It'll polish beautifully. And then it'll fall apart.
Well, we're talking about a product that's designed. That's not just for today. That's for its use as well. So it's just important for people to remember that.
It is important. I have deep respect for bench jewelers. And they are really, I always say that our customer on the front line, the very front line, is the bench jeweler. But then the bench jeweler needs to remember that they work for the retailer. And the retailers, it's all about the customer. It's all about the end user. And so the bench needs to stay connected to that. And so it's just everybody kind of working in harmony towards that consumer. Because you can have a bad experience with a 5% iridium ring, and then they'll say, "Oh God, I don't want platinum.
Don't like platinum.
I want platinum." Well, you need white gold. No, that's not the solution. It's just a harder platinum alloy, a stronger platinum alloy. That's the solution. Because that gold that they're going to put you in as the solution, it's not going to last.
We know it wears out now.
You're not going to pass that down to your granddaughter or your daughter. You're not.
Yeah.
Unless you don't wear it.
Well, who wants jewelry like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's just knowing your alloys. And I think that it's just education that's needed all the way across the board, right? The bench needs to talk to the retailer. Let's all talk about this. And when you do talk and have a good listening audience, there's so many aha moments. Usually it's like, I had no idea.
Right.
I had no idea. And thank you. Because I wondered why that happened.
Yeah. Very cool. I know we're up against your time clock, so
yes.
I'm trying to keep that in mind. Any last thoughts you have for our audience today?
Yeah.
Fund her research. That's my message. We need people to step up and help fund the next piece of research.
Yeah. This would be great. This would be great.
Anyone listening that wants to fund research.
Yeah, I think the message is that, whatever world you're working in, ask questions, understand your products. Channel your inner science geek a little bit. It's, we sell all these pretty things.
Yep.
Right? But we tend too often not to really want to know
why
the absolute, nuts and bolts of that material. We talk
Which
about
is part of its
stones a lot,
mystique.
right? We talk about stones all the time.
We do, and people
No
love
metals.
Yep. One of my speakers yesterday was saying she describes jewelry as a STEM career. It's about minerals and metals. It's about science and engineering and math, and that is a big part of what makes it really interesting.
Yeah.
There's a mystique to it, and it can become part of your story too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So be curious.
Be curious.
Ask more questions.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for being our science geek.
Yep.
You've done so much for the industry with your wanting to know why and your refusing to give up. And these are two characteristics that are very uniquely you. So, and thanks for sharing.
Well, and thank you for the opportunity to share my story.
My pleasure. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll stay tuned for the next chapter.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.